Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-hosts Jim Wilson, Newmark, Caleb Hoppus, Hanlon, Frank Hennessy, Premier Planning Group, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and Rick Steibrtz, Fisher Cunane. Matthew, could you give us a rundown on who we have on the air today, please?
I'd love to, Herb. We've got a very exciting show coming up. We're starting off with Margo DelliCarpini, the Chancellor of Penn State Abington. After that, we have Jeff Cohen, the Chairman, Co-founder, and CEO of Rice Cohen International. Following Jeff, we have Scott Rosen, the President of the Rosen Group, and we're wrapping up today with Marcus Schabacker, President and CEO of ECRI.
Excellent. Let's get started. Let's get to know Margo DelliCarpini, Chancellor of Penn State Abington. Margo, what is Penn State Abington?
Penn State Abington is a comprehensive liberal arts and science residential campus within the Commonwealth campus system of Penn State University, and we serve 3,200 students on our campus with over 21 degrees.
Where you're from originally, how many brothers and sisters, where are you in the pecking order?
I was born and spent my early years in Brooklyn, New York, then moved to Long Island, and I am the oldest of four with a brother and two sisters behind me.
And tell us a little bit, 8 to 14, 7 to 13 years old, when you were a kid, what were the variety of activities you were up to?
So I was a Girl Scout. I did swimming lessons in the summer and ballet and tap lessons in the winter. But I think outside of all of those formal activities, my greatest love was reading, and I could get lost in books, and I could read a book a day if given the opportunity.
Caleb?
Hey, Margo, tell us about your involvement in the Girl Scouts.
So as a Girl Scout, I got to know people. I got to develop real collaborative people skills. I think one of my favorite things was doing all of the projects and the badges that they had us do. Taught me problem solving. It taught me how to set goals, how to be patient, and how to keep trying, even if I couldn't do it the first time. So it really broadened my experiences.
Yeah, definitely a ton of different activities you can do in the Scouts. I'm wondering, how does that shape your leadership at Penn State Abington?
So I think one of the things I learned, those collaborative skills, those people skills, and the problem solving. As a chancellor at Penn State Abington, I am responsible for bringing people together, bringing ideas to the table, and really addressing problems both on our campus, in higher education, and in our communities.
Mm-hmm. Also, there was something in the green room. You were talking with Caleb about being a champion for the people. Where'd that come from, and what's that have to do with who you are nowadays?
So I think whenever I saw somebody struggling, I felt it was my obligation to go and help problem solve with them, or help find resources that they needed. I had a strong obligation to just being a helper and a caregiver. And I do that now. I think about problem solving, I think about resourcing, and I think about making sure people are getting and doing what they need.
Matthew?
Margo, you talked about your love of reading. How young were you when you started to love reading?
I think my mother will tell you that I read before I talked. I was always interested in books. I always was looking at pages. I memorized the stories that were read to me. So I don't think there was ever a time that I didn't have a book in my hand.
And who was the big impact? Like, who pushed you to start reading? Where'd that come from?
I had role models around me. There were books in my house. I'm a first generation college student, but despite that, my family really valued education. And I think my grandmother had one of the biggest influences. She would tell me stories, and then that turned into her writing these stories down for me. And it was just a wonderful way to escape, to get new experiences, and to really value what the power of information could do.
Tell me more about the stories that your grandmother was creating and telling you.
So she had this whole world created of these little people who lived in the roots of an oak tree, and they were loosely based on my immediate family, my mother and father and my grandfather and uncles. And there were just numerous adventures, and that instilled in me really a sense of wonder and lifelong learning.
And what is the connection between the trials and tribulations of the tiny people in the bottom of the oak tree and how they overcame those things? What's the connection between that and running Penn State Abington?
I think that what that taught me is that no organization or system is immune to problems, but successful ones are those that can solve those problems. And again, addressing challenges is a big part of my job, and solving problems for the greater good.
Frank?
Margo, tell us about growing up in Brooklyn and in Long Island. What do you most remember and how would you describe it?
So I think for me, the power of community is what I most remember. Very close-knit communities. New York City, people think New York is a huge cold place, but it's really a ton of small towns strung together. So that really instilled in me a sense of community. And in my own life, I think leveraging place and understanding how communities work is important.
Was everybody pretty similar or was there much diversity?
There was a lot of diversity, obviously, in Brooklyn. The communities I lived in on Long Island were less diverse, but diverse on different levels.
So how did you come to value the relationship between education and social mobility?
So I think my focus in my own career has been on institutions that provide access. And I think that directly relates to my grandmother, her own experience coming to New York from Puerto Rico, not speaking English. I was fascinated that she couldn't speak English in school. And when I asked her about that, she said, I didn't understand the words that people were saying, but I understood who wanted me there and who didn't. And I wanted to be the person who showed those kids that I wanted them there.
So tell me then, how does diversity and community show up on campus at Penn State Abington?
So Penn State Abington we are the most diverse campus in the Commonwealth campus system at Pennsylvania State University and at Penn State. We are a highly community engaged campus, highly productive, highly active campus. And I work constantly to directly connect faculty and students to the community, to leverage their expertise to collaboratively solve problems that the community identifies and to contribute to the public good.
Jim?
Margo, you seem to be surrounded by people and community your whole life, whether it's living in big cities or Girl Scouts. You mentioned you grew up the oldest of four. What was your role as the oldest of four?
So I think my role, I was a nurturer, I was a caregiver, I was a little bit of a mother hen. My brother and sisters might say I was a little bossy, but I felt that if we needed to get something done, I was the responsible party and made sure that we could solve problems and we could get things done. And I had a great sense of responsibility around that.
How do you think that role as the oldest relates to what you do right now at Penn State Abington?
Yeah, being the mother hen.
Yeah, so I think it really is providing the resources that people need to achieve their greatest goals and blossom and do what they are meant to do and what they want to do. I'm committed to student success, and I kind of directly relate helping my brothers and sisters be successful to now my commitment to making sure our faculty, students, and staff are successful.
Mr. Rick?
Margo, what do you think your grandmother would say if she saw you today in your role at Penn State, and how do you think she would feel?
My grandmother would be so proud of me. And I think it would humble her to know that all of the hard work that she and my grandfather and then my parents did enabled me to achieve what I have achieved. And I think that she would make sure that she told me, don't forget your obligation is to pay it forward and give back.
Wow. So your grandmother really was an inspiration in terms of what you're doing. Tell us more about that. Watching my grandmother, she was probably one of the most brilliant people I have ever met. But because of where she came from and her gender and the time that she was an adult, she didn't have access. And there were a number of barriers in her way. So watching that and seeing that, if my grandmother had the opportunities that I have today, she would have been, the queen of the world because she was so brilliant and so empathetic. And so again, I feel very obligated to use my privilege to break down those barriers, to give people opportunity. As the chancellor of Abington campus, at Penn State Abington, you get to sit in your fancy office all the day. You don't get out to talk to any of the kids, do you?
My day is spent talking to the students, and that's the most enriching part of my day. Abington, as we said earlier, is a vibrant campus community. I take every opportunity to get out and either walk campus. I have events to bring students in, and my door is always open, and I love when students pop their heads in to say hello.
So you really find the kids meaningful. You find that part of your job, the real meaning of your job.
Yeah, our students are the only reason we're there in higher education. They're they are our core mission, and they truly represent the future leaders and thinkers and problem solvers of our society.
What's the website address for Penn State Abington?
We are www.abington.psu.edu.
We've been speaking with Margo DelliCarpini, Chancellor of Penn State Abington, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break.
You now can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your advisors. Yes, this radio and online social media exposure is free and quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors.
We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. I'd like to introduce Jeff Cohen, Chairman, Co-founder, and CEO of Rice Cohen International. Jeff, what is Rice Cohen International? What are you folks doing?
Executive search firm.
Mm-hmm. How'd you get a job with this executive search firm?
I actually started it.
All righty. Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
Philadelphia, 2 brothers and a sister, and I'm the second to the oldest.
Alrighty, 8 to 14 years old. What kind of stuff were you up to?
That age, loved sports, football, basketball, baseball. From a work point of view, worked in a swim club on the maintenance crew, worked doing food shows with my father, and also had a newspaper route.
All right, Frank?
So, Jeff, you said sports were important to you, baseball, football, basketball. I'm curious, which one was your favorite?
Liked them all, but football was my favorite.
Why football, Jeff?
I think it was a little bit more aggressive than the other 2 sports, and there were more people involved. So I think there was more dynamics and relationships with your teammates.
Okay. What position did you play?
I was a tight end and a defensive end.
Okay. Now, what does it take to succeed in those positions on the gridiron?
Well, I think it takes a lot of hard work, a good work ethic, and I think really good communication with your teammates.
So how does that competitiveness, aggressiveness, teammate environment, how does that connect with running an executive search firm?
Well, you have to, without communication, there's no way you could do executive search where you're enhancing people's careers professionally and personally. So I think the communication is really important. And you also have to be aggressive and persistent, as sometimes finding the perfect match may not happen right away. You got to really stay persistent through it like you would on the gridiron.
Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Yeah, Jeff, you told us in the green room your parents got divorced at 9. What impact did that have on your childhood?
You know, it made me resilient. It was at first, it was difficult. Certainly, you know, not having my father there 7 days a week, but 3 days a week was difficult. But I think it made me stronger, and it made me appreciate and value the time we did have together.
And you also told me it had some impact when you were like in sporting events and on teams and stuff. What was that about?
Yeah, you know, knowing the fact that my father wasn't all my events where a lot of kids tend to look over and look at their father. I didn't have that. So it made me really play sports for me and want to do it for myself versus my father.
Did it also have any impact of making you recruit people, find people to play roles in your life?
No question about it. You know, I looked for my teammates and even their parents to maybe fill some of that missing void I may have had when my father wasn't there to throw the ball 7 days a week.
So do you think there's any connection between recruiting people into roles when you're a kid and what you're doing now?
Absolutely. I was recruiting what I was missing when I was a child, and I think I took that into the executive search where I've been recruiting for 35 years.
Caleb?
Hey, Jeff, tell me about the food shows that you attended with your dad.
Great memories. My father was in the pickle business. So 5 times a year, they would do food shows where my father would actually cut pickles up and then lure people in and build some relationships to try the pickles and then try to have them have restaurants and potential retail stores buy them.
Were you interacting a lot with the other attendees of the shows?
Absolutely. My father would bring them in and I would talk to them and I would try to sometimes engage them and bring them over for him. So it really taught me a lot about interacting with people who maybe don't even have an interest in tasting a pickle at the time, but just trying to, like I said, build common ground and get them to try the pickle.
Yeah, I'm sure that can be intimidating as a youngster at these shows with 100, thousands of people there. I mean, what other lessons do you learn about maybe breaking down barriers with people?
Well, I learned that when people say no, I learned at a very early age that they're not really rejecting you and not to take it personally, that maybe they just weren't in the mood for a pickle. So I think it taught me the importance of, not taking rejection personally. And I think it also taught me the importance of making sure that I build a relationship. And that's what it all starts by, the relationship, not even about trying to pickle. But if you build a relationship, you have a higher percentage of gaining try that pickle.
Interesting. Mr. Jim.
Yeah, so people don't really need pickles. So kind of what were your sales tactics in getting people to
really my sales tactics, and my father was a master and I credit him for this, was just kind of trying to build the relationships, understand, maybe what brought people to the show, and then just try to, in a very nice way, ask them if they could give some input on the potential product, which happens to be a pickle.
So it sounds like you're really selling them on the reliability and trustworthiness. I read something, a quote on your website, that 46% of new hires fail in the first 18 months. What does the reliability and trustworthiness that you learned from those sales tactics kind of have to do with your business?
Yeah, I learned that it's really important to build a relationship up front. And that's really where it all starts. And I learned that from early on, and especially in the business, it's really important that when the company is trying to lure someone in, they have to really understand what's important to that person and make sure a match is right. And that's really the key that we've taken in the search firm for the last 35 years.
Rick?
Jeff, from what you learned from your father when you were selling pickles and learning how to be persuasive, at what point did it cross your mind that at some day you might want to have your own business? Did you learn anything that made you think that?
Yeah, I did. My father always talked about wanting to do his own business, but never really wanted to take the risk or take the chance to do that. So I learned early on that I wanted to do that. I wanted to try to, not be able to say that I wish I would have, or I wonder what would have happened. So he actually inspired me to take the risk to try my own business. And I've always liked to help people. And that's the reason why I started, the search business.
Mm-hmm. So Dad was aware that you started your own business. How do you think he felt?
I think at first he was probably nervous, the fact that, I was going to try something. But once he saw there was some success and we were really helping people and a lot of good was coming and money was following, of course, I think he was really proud that that's the one trait that didn't hold me back, that held him back, that I took from him.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, we've talked a lot about your dad. We haven't talked about your mom, who was actually there all the time. What do you bring to your business? What do you bring to running your business every day that your mom taught you?
My mom taught me about confidence, how important it was to have confidence when early on, when my parents were first divorced. I think I lacked a little bit of that. My mother taught me about appreciation, not having much growing up. We went to pizza for our birthday and to really appreciate what was probably the norm for most people, but not for us. And my mother also taught me about tough decisions. When I was playing sports, my mother made me pick a sport. which at 12 years old, when you loved all three, but you could only play one, and needing to make that choice, she taught me the importance of sometimes making tough decisions.
The neighborhood you grew up in, Northeast Philadelphia, were those the fancy dancy houses?
No, unfortunately, no, they weren't. But they were the row homes. But they were people who really cared about one another, helped one another, and it wasn't fancy dancy. It was the row homes you see in Northeast Philadelphia.
So, were there a lot of kids in your neighborhood then?
Yes, there was.
How many kids were there in the neighborhood?
15 to 20.
And what was your role amongst those kids?
I was always the person trying to make sure that everybody was out playing and getting along. So I was the one that was trying to get the stickball game going. And if there was a confrontation, I was always the one that tried to stop the confrontation before it escalated so we can continue to have fun and play ball.
So how'd that lay the groundwork, the fact that you were good at starting things and making sure that everybody stayed bonded? How'd that lay the groundwork for this organization known as Rice Cohen International?
Well, I think it's really important because when somebody's looking for a job and going through a process, there's a lot of different twists it could take throughout the process. So I think being able to, as I was younger, being able to, when confrontation or something comes up, being able to deal with it and solve the problem and fix it works very well in the search business as people walk through a strategic hiring process to make sure that the end is that people get in the right positions.
Website address for Rice Cohen International?
www.ricecoheninternational.com.
We've been speaking with Jeff Cohen, Chairman, Co-founder, and CEO of Rice Cohen International here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, we will be back in a moment. Don't go away. We'll be right back. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. I'd like to introduce Scott Rosen, president of the Rosen Group. Scott, what is the Rosen Group?
The Rosen Group is a staffing firm that specializes in the contract and direct hire placement of human resource professionals.
Where you're from originally, how many brothers and sisters, where are you in the pecking order?
Grew up in Trenton, New Jersey area, 2 older brothers, half brothers, and I'm the youngest.
And the half brothers, were there some discontent in the family, or what was there, divorce, or what was going on in the family dynamics?
Yeah, so my mom had first marriage, had the 2 boys, and then divorced, and then married my dad and had me.
Mm-hmm. And what was going on in your childhood with the family dynamics, and what did that do to you?
There's a lot of conflict between my parents. You know, my dad was a workaholic. My mom had some issues. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of like left on my own. So a lot of kind of, you know, being out there on my own, doing things on my own, a lot of daydreaming, thinking about the future. So that's how I spent my younger childhood.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what kind of stuff you were up to 8 to 14 years old. What kind of stuff were you doing?
Yeah, so 8 to 14, a lot of sort of beginning entrepreneurial things. I had a paper route in the 8 to 12 range, and then started working for a hoagie shop in the Trenton area. Also kind of ran around with a group of kids that we did a lot of stuff on our own because they also had kind of non-attentive parents as well. So there was a lot of free time for us to do a lot of things in the hood.
Mm-hmm. All right. Jim?
Hey, you mentioned you grew up in Trenton. How would you characterize the neighborhood you grew up in?
Trenton's area, kind of a lower to lower middle class, area.
What did your dad do for money? What were his jobs?
So he owned a tavern in Trenton, in actually downtown Trenton, and he also owned some real estate where he, collected rents.
So how would you characterize your dad's interactions with the people that he was at the tavern and I guess, his tenants? What did you learn?
Yeah, I mean, I used to hang out at the bar a bit and also go out with him on collection runs. You know, it was a tough crowd. You know, people, you know, weren't maybe making the money that they needed to. So, you know, there was a lot of wrangling to try and get the rents collected. My dad was, I would say he was a kind, quiet, introverted guy, but he also could be tough when he needed to.
So you had to kind of walk that line, balance the kindness and the toughness. You said you had a paper route. Did you ever have any issues with collections on the paper route?
Yeah, I mean, I was in an apartment complex and I was running around up and down the stairs, knocking on doors, you know, people not answering, you know, having to kind of, you know, call out that I'm here, come back, be assertive, persistent, those types of things.
How do you think that relates to what you do now?
I think I've kind of incorporated a lot of those, you know, traits. You know, I do think I'm a good relationship person. I tend to be, you know, affable and enjoy working with people. But, you know, at times I have to set boundaries and be, you know, be a little bit on the assertive side.
Matthew?
Yeah, Scott, you were just talking about your paper route that you started when you were 8 years old, if I heard you right. Tell me, how'd you come to get that paper route?
Yeah, so I think one of my friends in the neighborhood was somehow, you know, there was a paper called the Trentonian, and I think he applied and then I applied, and, you know, they said, do you have a bike? And I said, yeah. And they said, okay, here's your kit, get going.
And did you end up with a bunch of you and your friends doing the paper routes?
There were a few of us. There was one kid in particular that we had like sort of, you know, he had one part of the neighborhood, I had the other part. So it was just a couple kids that I knew.
And so then when I think you said you had the paper route to 12, what'd you do after that?
So there was a deli in the area, hoagie shop called Aljon's, and again a bunch of us who kind of hung together went down. We applied. You know, as soon as a couple kids got jobs, then the rest of us got jobs, and that's how I kind of picked up on that role.
And I'm struck by the way you went from the paper route to the hoagie shop with friends doing it all together. Tell me, what is that moving job to job with friends? What does that have to do with running a staffing firm?
Yeah, so I think I picked up, you know, so from my dad, sort of that entrepreneurial part of it. And then I think with the friends part, because we did a lot of other things together, I learned about working with a team and you know, being sort of you know, part of the crowd, if you will, being a team player. And I think in my business, you know, I started my business on my own. I eventually built a team, and I was able to work with that team in sort of a similar fashion as to when I was younger.
Mm-hmm. Frank?
Hey, Scott, you said as a youngest child of divorced parents, you spent a lot of time alone, and you categorize yourself as a daydreamer and an idea maker. What does that tell us about you?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I really was focused on there was a restlessness about myself that I wanted to sort of get out of my current situation. So I would think about, I could be a professional basketball player, or I could start a business, or, you know, whatever other famous, you know, ideas that I had about, you know, maybe just getting out of where I was and getting into something,
interesting.
Interesting.
And you also told us that you had a lot of time with your friends in the neighborhood, various activities. What were some of those activities?
We just sort of had a routine every day after school. You know, we'd play basketball, we'd go play some street hockey, we played wiffle ball, we'd play Risk, Pinochle, you know, you name it. There were probably 15 different things that we did at various times.
So what was your role? Did you have to pick teams and match make, or was it all organized for you?
No, it wasn't organized. It was all pickup, you know, and different people took leadership roles at different times. You know, hey, you know, I'm the leader of street hockey, or I'm going to put the basketball game together. So, you know, I was probably leaning more towards basketball. And I also like the games, you know, the board games and card games.
So all that interaction and collaboration, how has that translated to a focus, an HR focus with staffing?
Well, you know, staffing is a matchmaking business, and it's a facilitation business. You know, you're putting clients together with candidates. And so I guess my ability to kind of create and work with teams, facilitate, you know, I'm a peacemaker of sorts. So, you know, trying to bring, you know, people together is one of my core skills, and that works well in the staffing business.
Mm-hmm. Caleb?
Hey, Scott, what kind of student were you, or what was your personality like at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I was a good student grade-wise. You know, definitely, you know, got good grades, smart kid. But I was a little bit of a, you know, rule breaker, class clown, rabble rouser in my school days.
Yeah, you mentioned you like being kind of affable. I mean, what made you want to be that guy that made everyone laugh?
Yeah, I think I was craving attention. I think, the fact that my parents, weren't really that we didn't have a really strong family unit. So I probably felt that I needed attention. And one way to get it is to sort of, play that role in school.
So I think you mentioned the Rosen Group has about 40 people working for them now, so it can't be all fun and games. I mean, how do you balance a fun work environment and also making sure business gets done?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I feel like I'm a good guy. I'm a kind guy. I try to build relationships with people, but if there's a situation that needs to be dealt with and the client is not happy or whatever, then I will sort of amp it up a little bit and get more assertive, but never to the point where I'm aggressive or, you know what I mean? I always try to keep it, say what you mean, but don't say it mean.
Mm-hmm. Rick?
Hi, Scott. It's impressive, the HR consulting business that you've started. I'm especially impressed. 35 to 40 people decided to put their stake in you and to become your employees. How did you convince them to do that? And what did you draw from? How were you persuasive in getting them to join you?
Well, having been in business now 26 years, I've built a brand up in the community of HR folks. And so I have a good reputation. So people sort of naturally navigate towards me. And then once we sort of have that conversation and they feel like they trust me. They feel like, I'm a good guy. I'm going to do right by them. Cause a lot of people in the staffing industry, staffing can have a reputation for not being that way.
Mm-hmm. So you really enjoy your job. You're really built for your job, trying to build the team, keep the team together. What's the best part of your job?
Yeah, I mean, I love placing people, just putting people in jobs, and then I hear back from them 3, 4, 5 years later. Hey, you found me this job. It's been the greatest job of my life. There's a really, hundreds of people being placed over the years really is a lot of satisfaction.
Website address for the Rosen Group?
Rosengroup.com.
We've been speaking with Scott Rosen, president of the Rosen Group here on Executive Leaders Radio. Rosengroup.com. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. That's executiveleadersradio.com. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. Don't go away.
Recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, Executive Leaders Radio. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable. Yes, this radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors for free exposure.
We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Marcus Schabacker, President and CEO of ECRI. What is ECRI, Marcus?
ECRI is a 50-year young non-for-profit organization which is focused on advancing evidence-based and effective healthcare globally.
How many employees and how many clients you guys got?
400 employees in Plymouth Meeting near Philadelphia, Kuala Lumpur, London, and Dubai, and we have thousands of clients all around the world.
So tell me, where you're from originally, how many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
The oldest of two, and originally from Germany, but lived in Australia and South Africa before coming to the States 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So what was it like where you grew up and how you grew up?
Well, my earliest memory is I'm growing up on a farm, small farm with my grandparents, or at my grandparents with my mom and my father. And I've come back there all the time because I just loved it, even when my parents moved away to another town in Germany.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned your grandparents were religious, and there was something about theology and physician and rainforest and hospital. Well, we'll dig into that. Caleb, why don't you take it?
Hey, Marcus, what was one of your favorite things to do on the farm?
I loved horse riding. We had to get up 5 o'clock in the morning, feed the cows, get the manure out, spent the rest of the day on the field. And then the highlight of the day was when you had the work done and you did well, my uncle took me horse riding.
So tell us a little bit about it. What do you enjoy about it? The horseback riding?
I just love the interaction with the horses. They're amazing animals, and you partner with them and you care for them. You have to tender to them when they respect you and you treat them well. They do things for you you couldn't believe, right? So it's that partnership, and it's always been fascinating to me, and it really helped me grow as a young adult into somebody I am today.
Yeah, a horse can be a tough thing to control. I mean, now you're leading a huge company, 500 employees, thousands of clients. So these are kind of two big entities that you're used to dealing with. How do you kind of compare horseback riding and leading a big company, and what you learn from horseback riding?
Well, the one, as I said, it's caring for your partners. And in this case, it was the animal, the horse. Now it's my employees. That's who I care for. And at the end of the day, we want to make life better. We want to be successful for our clients. And at the end of the day, it's all about the patient. And that's what we care about. And I get the best out of my people if they feel that I honestly care for them.
Matthew?
Marcus, how young were you when you decided you wanted to be a physician?
10 or 12. I had read a book at my grandparents' farm. There wasn't much books around. So they had a book about Albert Schweitzer, who was a theology professor come physician to serve underserved communities in the jungle of Africa. And I thought that was fascinating. Decided, hey, I want to become a physician, help people.
You're telling me at 12 years old, you read a book and decided you wanted to be a physician, and that was it? The decision was made?
Yeah, pretty much. No other healthcare workers in my family. That was it.
And you told me it might even have interrupted your early dating life. Tell me that story.
Yeah, I was fourth grade. A girl wanted to go out with me, and she had taller, and I was a little scared. So I said to her, sorry, I really would love to go out with you, but I got to focus on school. I want to go to med school. I want to become a physician. And that was it. That attitude didn't last too long. I had girlfriends after that.
But you also, I'm sure, but you also told me that your parents really encouraged this kind of seeing dreams and going after them. Give me another example of that.
Oh, absolutely. They were very supportive. 14, I wanted to go and volunteer on a psychiatric geriatric ward. And they, initially they said, why would you do that? But then they said, sure, go ahead. That's a great thing. After high school, I decided that I wanted to go to Australia and just disappeared for half a year and hitchhiked around Australia, worked on cattle stations, sheep ranches, wheat farms, opal mine, and they just encouraged me. And mind you, at that time, no connection, right? There was no email, no cell phone, no nothing. They didn't hear from me for half a year.
Mm-hmm. Frank?
Marcus, living in Germany, Australia, South Africa, how did your observations about medicine and healthcare advance your interest in effective medical outcomes?
This really enabled, particularly my time in Africa, where resources were extremely limited and we had to make do with what we have. It really helped me to get an appreciation how unequal the access to healthcare is, and then coming to the United States, the richest country in the world with the most access to healthcare in theory, that really formed my thinking around, so how do we make healthcare better for everyone? How do we make healthcare equitable? And that's how I came to ECRI, because ECRI is really focused on making healthcare more affordable. It's focusing on what's actually working and how our members, which are mainly healthcare providers, can be better for their patients and make healthcare more.
So you've contributed to healthcare as a physician, as an academic, as a corporate executive, but now you're at a nonprofit. So what does that tell us about what's important to you and the mission of ECRI?
at the end of the day, it's all about the patient, and I think with ECRI now, I can serve that best. I can bring all these things together, from being active as a physician, understanding the science as an academic, understanding how the business world works, spent 20 years in corporate America, and now bringing all that together to really make healthcare. But I'll speak truth to power, no matter who the power is, the government, a big company, a healthcare provider who's not doing the right thing. That's what we do.
Jim?
Yeah, you had mentioned obviously your family, was a big role model for you growing up. Who were some of your other role models growing up?
Schweitzer, as I mentioned, and then Nelson Mandela. I was fascinated, and that's why I went to Africa, in the 90s after he took power from the apartheid. And, he came out of 26 years of prison and was focused on truth and reconciliation instead of revenge. I was really impressed by that and the approach he took, and standing up for what is right, standing up for what he has believed, and not being beat down by 26 years of hard labor.
Might seem like a non sequitur, but preventable medical errors, where does that kind of fall in the stack of, leading causes of death?
It's the third leading cause of death in the United States. That was before COVID. Now it's the fourth leading cause of death. And that's one of our big focuses. How can we avoid this? So there's about 100 to 300,000 people each year die of preventable medical errors. And we can do something about it. And ECRI is very, very focused on that and helping establishing guidelines, establishing best practices, finding the best equipment, and then putting it all together in an evidence-based way so that hospital and physicians and nurses know what to do and what is working. We just partnered with an organization, the Institute for Safe Medication Practice, which is focusing on medication errors in particular. And bringing these two organizations together has really accelerated our ability to prevent medical errors.
So Nelson Mandela and that passion for truth, how that relates to, preventable medical errors. What do you see there?
Well, it's, one of the big things is you learn from your mistakes, but you can only learn from them if you acknowledge them. And if you make them knowledgeable, you fess up, you stay to the truth, and then you become better from it. And I think that's what is some of that, what is driving that in making us the organization we are.
Rick?
Marcus, I'm curious what you were like growing up. How would you describe your personality as a kid, age 8 to 14?
Well, I think I'd like to be with others, but I had, I don't have a large group of friends. I had one or two really, really good friends, and that relationship was very important to me. And this is how it is today. I value my self-time, but I also value relationships where I can grow. People who are honest with me, who give me feedback, who make me a better person than I was yesterday.
What's that have to? Yeah. Matthew?
How young were you when you learned to acknowledge mistakes and receive feedback, Marcus?
Oh, you learn that on the farm pretty quickly. You get out, you're not treating the animals right, or you're doing something wrong, you're giving them the wrong feed. My uncle and the maid who was in the stable, they were pretty straightforward. There was no getting away with any nonsense.
And how do you deal with that as a kid, right? You could run away. I messed up, but it sounds to me like you stood up and you learned and you figured it out. Where does that come from?
Well, you tried to be better the next day, right? You got out, you buried your ego, which was, hurt quite a few times. And the horses tell you a lot. I tell you, you making a mistake on a horse, you landing in the dirt. So, you learn very, very quickly.
What's all that have to do with ECRI?
Well, it just keeps me humble. I think it keeps me focused on what is the right thing to do, and help my people to grow, help our organization to grow. And I'm trying to lead by example. I'm never expecting anything from my people what I'm not willing to do.
Website address for ECRI?
Pardon, sorry?
Website address?
Okay, ECRI.org.
We've been speaking with Marcus Schabacker, President and CEO of ECRI. And Matthew, can you give us a rundown on who else we've had the opportunity of speaking with today?
Sure can, Herb. We've had a really entertaining show this morning. We started off with Margo, DelliCarpini, the Chancellor of Penn State Abington. We had Jeff Cohen, the Chairman, Co-founder, and CEO of Rice Cohen International. We had Scott Rosen, the President of the Rosen Group. And just now we finished up with Marcus Schabacker, the President and CEO of ECRI.
I'd like to thank my co-hosts, Jim Wilson, Newmark, Caleb Hoppus, Hanlon, Frank Hennessy, Premier Planning Group, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and Rick Stybers, Fisher Canine, for giving me a hand structuring the questions, hopefully providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. I'd like to thank our listening audience for listening. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a radio show. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. And thank you for joining us today. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.